Hmm.
So,
Oh.
have you been working on some PCK for the OS slash GU uh,
What's GU? Wait, what?
Gnostic Unwind?
Oh, crap. I forgot I gave the name like that. No,
Whatever.
I
Anyway,
don't like that
um,
name.
uh, OS also has the issue as an abbreviation of original spin that it sounds like operating system, which is
Yes. That's what I
unfortunate.
assumed you meant.
No. Um,
Yeah. Um, yeah, so I'm getting some proto I know it's not proto PCK. It's like some initial PCK that's not yet like, here is the gelled thing. But I'm starting to get some hypotheses and noticing it having impact on people in ways that I think are really beautiful. Um, so I can describe some case studies that are coming up. But one of the themes that I'm noticing is that, at least in terms of how I experience it, it's very intertwined with the inverse of Naraka.
hmm.
Um, it feels sort of like maybe original spin is the essential piece of Hellrealm.
Hmm.
um, it might be more than that. It might
Right, right.
be analyzed. It might just be necessary, but like not sufficient. Hellrealm is this other thing. Like this is not
Yeah.
accounting for things like the Hungry Ghost stuff, which seems to me like it probably also relates to original spin, etc.
Mm-hmm.
But um, like I've had a couple of cases where like I made a post on Facebook yesterday that was basically attempting to directly antidote something here.
Mm.
Um, and this seems a little off to the side, but it really is on theme, so I'll describe the thing in there. There's a thing that I keep encountering where um, I used to feel this way, and I keep encountering people feeling this way, where they feel like there's something wrong with them needing to reach out to people for help.
Right. Yeah.
Um, and to me, this seems like it's really clearly a very particular sort of confusion, and it's a type of confusion that is built on a seed of truth, but it weaponizes the seed of truth for cruelty.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, the seed of truth, I think, is really simple. It's just that if I hurt in some way, and no one around me knows how to help me with that hurt, and I'm not able to help myself with that hurt, then I am trapped in pain.
Mm-hmm.
I can't make other people able to hold my pain.
Mm.
Um, I can, over time, build my ability to hold my own pain. And that means that someone is caring for this one. So, out of care for me, developing my ability to hold myself, even if I am alone in doing so, seems to be
Mm.
a really important element of kindness. Um, but this often gets translated into something like you're not supposed to need other people,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and that you have some sort of responsibility to be able to hold anything that's going on with you entirely alone. And if you don't, you're kind of socially defecting or something.
Well, if you don't, you're like a child,
Right, which is for
something.
some bizarre reason bad. It says something really weird about how we view children.
Well, no, no, but I think there is a thing where it's like children are not expected to like, especially young, very young children are not expected to like uh feed themselves. Either in the literal sense or in the sense of like making money to buy the food to feed themselves, and like this is okay because they're children.
Yeah, the I still think that the screwy reasoning is going on there, where it's either disrespectful to children or it's disrespectful to what a child means. Um, because it isn't like somebody grows up thinking, well, now that I have adult levels of free will and ability to develop myself, I'm going to consciously decide I'm not going to grow up and make everybody else take care of me anyway. Like that's not that might happen sometimes, but that's not the
Yeah, yeah.
control.
No, I think you're right, and I think what it highlights is insofar as there's a pretty sentence here. I'm not sure if I can make it though. Like insofar as the person is doing a thing that is childish, that is because they are developmentally at that level, and that is just as appropriate and love worthy as it is for a child. And insofar as the person is not doing something that's childish, they are not doing something that is childish.
Right.
And
Right.
so, like, where's the problem?
Yeah.
And the
Exactly.
problem is simply we don't know how to hold you.
Yes. Yeah. Um, and saying we don't know how to hold you, which means there's something wrong with you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like that's just cruel.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, this feels very related to the way that when we had that conversation in the doorway a year ago,
mhm.
and you were like, I feel like I'm supposed to like dig myself out of this pit, and like I can, nobody will help me. Like I only me, I can help me, and uh, I'm just being left to
Yeah.
suffer something. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that was me expressing in Naraka terms a um, this point. I uh, there's I think that there is like I am grateful that I found a way out of it that I'm
Hmm.
able to name like when I say something like oh no this aspect is something that culture is actually just wrong and cruel about
Hmm.
but the way that I'm able to hold that feels cleaner now this and I think that's directly because of seeing original spin
Hmm.
there's there's an element when I say that it is wrong and cruel I don't mean there is someone who should feel bad about doing
Right.
it
Right. It's just it is not what we want. There is no we that
collectively
wants this.
hurts.
It hurts.
It collectively hurts.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's true. The part of original spin includes all this weird stuff, like when people try to use holy perfection to say, "Yeah, but really this is a perfect thing," and blah blah blah. It's like, well, no, but this is wrong.
Right. It's
That's
like it's
true.
perfect on that level, but insofar as anything can be said to be wrong.
Yeah, I want to say, yeah, it's like right and wrong are part of the absolute unity.
Mm-hmm.
And and it's
And
there's a kind of like part of original spin is a fundamental gaslighting thing
yeah,
and you're
I have to.
using holy perfection to uproot your ability to notice that some things are bad. Right?
Yep. Right, which is related to my pointing at the bad is good actually psyop.
hmm
It's
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah,
it's like no, insofar as those words mean literally anything, it's
yeah,
not.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think maybe I've sort of slowly wiggled towards my own rederivation of the point you were making by putting that forward. Um, yeah,
About that psyop.
yeah, about that particular
Yeah,
psyop.
yeah, yeah. It felt like you did. Like it felt like what you were bringing forth here was yours and from you, and you're like, yeah, people use like holy perfection and gaslighting, like, and I
Oh,
was like, yes.
I didn't mean to emphasize the my authorship part. I was trying
No,
to
no, no, no.
emphasize. I think we're jamming on the
Yeah,
same point,
yeah.
and that's
No,
cool.
but I do like what you said about how like like what you expressed to me was, hang on, I'm slightly reassuring you here. I liked knowing that you found a different route to it or something,
Mm.
and that like, yeah.
Yeah, as per the meta protocol thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Um. So it seems to me that this is a fuzzy space where I feel like I can move more clearly than I mentally understand.
Mm.
And these movements are part of what I'm observing as I'm helping people through these pain points. Um, there's something like the absolute opposite of gaslighting for myself and for standing up for that right for others. It seems to be the sort of unwinding thing that I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And this thing about, but bad is bad. And This isn't an abstraction. In fact, the abstractions confuse the point. Like,
Hmm.
like the business of, yeah, but isn't it sometimes good for you to develop discipline to push through hard things? And I'm like, those words could potentially be pointing at something true,
But they don't
but
negate the part where bad is bad.
yes,
It's like,
and
insofar as it's good to develop discipline to push through hard things, it's good.
yes. And more importantly, the reason you would need to say that is usually because you're trying to override that sense.
This is, I think I know what you mean, but unpack it.
Um, if I can tell for myself directly that when I go to the gym and I'm working really hard and this is a major challenge, but I'm also forging my discipline and I'm
Mm-hmm.
doing something that I care about, then the discomfort feels directly connected to something I care about, and it's the care that moves me through it. The reason I would need to say something to myself along the lines of, oh, this is really hard, but man, discipline is good for me, is precisely because I'm disconnected from the care and the way that the difficulty feels connected to what I'm caring for. And I'm trying to override it by basically saying, yeah, but really the pain is good for me because abstract thinking.
Right. And it may even turn out that it has whatever effects that are later recognized as good. But in the meantime, there's a quality of sheer between
Right.
like one sense of things and some imposition.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So, um, it seems to me that the unwinding is, it's, I keep being able to point at it and then going, how do I articulate the soul of this? Um, on the flip side of it is that Naraka is made of the belief that it is possible to be trapped in suffering.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
So it sounds like the, huh. I'm like, I'm sort of like, okay, so, you know, unbelieve that it's possible to be trapped in suffering.
well, if you try to add a
But,
should to this, like you need to get out of this, otherwise you're going to be trapped in Naraka, then you're already at the gates.
oh,
This is part of the stickiness of Naraka. One of the
yeah, yeah,
things,
yeah.
oh,
This feels related to that conversation we had like a week or two ago. That was something like it it sucks that people are having experiences of being trapped in suffering, and the experience of trappedness is also real, and the experience of suffering is also real, and the trappedness is not fundamental, but it's all real, and it does actually suck. And like there's a thing of like, as an external person, or well, either from the inside, being like, I'm actually free to keep suffering insofar as that is apparently the thing that I know how to do right now. Like I don't have to get out because I should get out because it's bad to be trapped in the hell realms.
yeah. And that gets tied up with the confusion around, but it's bad and I want out.
um yeah. And also, right, and also I want help getting out,
Yeah,
because it's like, how do you help someone out without wanting them to be out in a way that hooks them into shooting them out?
right, right. And this connects back to the thing about people learning to uh, fear their own desire or need for help.
Right. Hmm.
I want to say something here like, as far as I can tell, unwinding original spin. I don't know about, well, that that also happens to be true, but there is an unwinding here that, as far as I can tell, is made of a move that is something like fully admitting and holding and cherishing, I do not want to go into Naraka ever again.
Hmm.
Not as a desperate scream, because that's already part of the energy. It's recognizing that the desperate scream is part of it and just saying, no, I don't want that.
Yeah. This is slippery and it's really good. And it feel part of what feels good to me about it is that it reminds me of a like a sensation that I felt the day that we first noticed original spin before we even had the name for it. Um, where I recognized I was like shooting myself into experiencing freedom
Right.
or something. Like I was like, oh yeah, I've sure got to practice my freedom every day. And and then like there was this like psychoactive thing where like I noticed that. I noticed that I was doing that. And I was like, and I noticed that that was actually one of the main ways in which I felt unfree. And so then I allowed myself to feel subjectively in first person, what do I want right now? Am I um like am I allowed to feel the sensual pleasures of my body or something? And hang on. Speaking of bodily pleasures, I'm cold.
Mm.
Slightly better. Um hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I've found that the more I follow this pathway of exploring original spin and what's involved in unwinding, and where I see people suffering from it and helping them to untie it, one of the loudest things that's come into my awareness was all this stuff that, like, I've been thinking about and trying to understand Naraka for many years. Um, like in the wake of the Black Lotus stuff, there was like,
Hmm. What
this is
is this?
clearly something for me to orient to. And I went down into some of the deepest pits of Naraka in ayahuasca in 2019.
Mm-hmm.
Um, uh, but like it always has this sticky nature. Like when I was referring to memes as clockwork demons, there's something funny about how even just gesturing towards something that has hell realm resonance seems to cause a very particular kind of confusion that activates it in people, which is why I stopped using that terminology.
Mm-hmm.
Um, uh, the trying to talk about it, like trying to talk about the traps that make people concerned about the possibility of being trapped in suffering causes people to start getting trapped in suffering. So it's it's a very weird sticky thing that's sort of like, if you look at it or if you name it, it's already got you. And like it kept having this nature all over the place, and it feels like particularly in the last month, I now feel like I have a handle for being able to talk pretty directly about it in a way that the way that I embody reference to it is actually it's like Teflon with it.
Mm-hmm.
That is the point. It's the
Mm-hmm.
so and part of that has meant that the nature of the energy has lit up super vividly in all of these little places everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Every place where it shows up, the little tiny things like uh right. So this article on I wrote in Less Wrong.
Yeah.
Uh, there are, like, part of what I was doing with that as kind of a background thing is most gender discourse, especially in rationalist space, has a particular taste of a sort of existential doom. This
Hmm.
is a slightly different flavor than the existential doom of AI, but it's not unrelated. Uh, it's this quality of, well, ultimately all of the gender stuff is about this kind of sexual competition, and it's all nasty game theory clawing all the way down.
Right, right. Which is not unrelated to the fear of AI.
No, it's not at all. And and it's like that is part of the taste of Naraka. It is this quality of horror is actually a fundamental attribute of reality, and if you see reality clearly enough, you will find horror there because that is wedded to the truth.
Hmm.
Um, and
It
the way
seems
in which,
possible to me that horror is one of many things you would find if you see reality clear enough or something. But sort
um,
of it doesn't have a special place there. It's just like
well, but it does have a special place because it's bad, right? This is
yeah,
part
yeah,
of
yeah. No, no, no.
crap, right?
And you wouldn't want to ignore bad things, would you?
Well, but there's also something of like this is a lot of why a whole bunch of psychedelic experiences were meta horrible to me. Like they were existentially just absolutely the most terrible thing possible, because it would flicker between bliss and horror, among a bunch of other things,
Hmm.
in ways that were fundamentally wedded to the nature of existence at all. And the fact that, oh sure, there's wonder and there's horror, and that's all true, and that's just part of relating to truth. And I'm left staring at this going, then why the fuck would you want to relate to truth? Why would you want to call that good? It seems to me like this is a an error, that you would want to do something that is about encouraging the good stuff and discouraging the bad
Hmm.
stuff.
Hmm.
This doesn't seem complicated to me.
Hmm.
Somehow this is mystically kind of like ignorant or something, and that part of the way that you embrace all goodness is that you come to recognize the things you're calling bad are good, though, and it's
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It feels related to me to something about death and decay. And there was I was thinking about death a bunch yesterday, actually, and I read something that a friend had written um that was about like different aspects of death and sort of being like, well, even if, this body dies, like there's a sense in which I'm not separate from like the universe, which like keeps going. And the heat death of the universe, okay, like also sucks, but everything has edges. But then there was like uh the final line of the piece of writing was, I don't think death is good. When something is good, you generally try to cause more of it, and I'm not into that. And that's just like really, really succinct. It's like, but that's different. Like, so there's a naive thing, which is denying death, like denying the reality of death, refusing to come to grips with the reality that death, you know, has occurred, is occurring, will occur, you know, all of that. But then there's like accepting death, but in order to accept it, you sort of have to call it good.
yeah. I'm reminded of, I think there's one of the last Yin articles I wrote several years ago,
Hmm.
pounding this point of, um, look, death obviously isn't what brings meaning to life. Love is what brings meaning to life. The thing that death does is that it makes it easier to open calcified parts of our heart that we don't otherwise know how to open. This seems incredibly dead obvious. um, uh, and um, that part of the reason that death is able to do that is precisely because it's horrible.
Hmm.
Like the thing about, if someone you love dies, the reason that cracks you open is because that was horrid.
Hmm. Hmm. Mm. Mm. Yeah, I feel in what you're saying and in this quote that I just read of like I don't think death is good. When something is good, you generally try to cause more of it, and I'm not into that. Is like I feel in all of that this unwinding antidote thing that we're crafting here.
Yeah, yeah. It feels to me that um, maybe a slightly more mythic way of talking about this. Uh, so yes, of course, horror is interwoven with the nature of existence. That's another way of saying that Naraka is a possible place slash state to enter.
Mm.
Okay? Um,
But that doesn't mean anyone. It doesn't mean that in principle anyone ever has to go there.
right.
Like and has to is doing some funny work here. Like
It,
people have and they yet will.
uh, that you will be flung in harder if you don't choose to go.
Hmm.
Okay? That is, again, part of the taste of Naraka. The damned if you do, damned if you don't flavor is Naraka mimetic code. So there's something that seems very simple and true along the lines of, yeah, sure, horror is possible in the world, and I am done with it. I'm not going to enter it. I'm not going to um, buy into anything that claims that I am obliged to choose it.
Hmm.
This is not a I am like fuck that rah 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 rah. I mean, you can add that energy, and I don't think that it's necessarily a mistake to do so, but it's
Hmm.
unnecessary
Right. All right. Yeah.
because the choice is deeper than that. The choice is actually made of, but bad is bad though,
Hmm.
and I'm going to stop being gaslit on this point.
Hmm. This is making me think that the bad is good actually psyop and original spin are maybe more like we were positing that they were different.
Yeah, I was positing that bad is good though would have to be derived from original spin.
Right.
And that might still be true. It might be that what I'm finding is that as a matter of PCK, you have to go through the bad is good though psyop in order to unwind
Right.
original.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That seems right. That seems right. Like it's sort of like the bad is good psyop like keeps original spin in place maybe.
Something like that. Yeah, I think original spin is a in some. Let me think through the structure of it. Like it strikes me as it is an attack on gnosis. Like that is fundamentally what it is. It uproots you from gnosis so that you are programmable. Um, and the way that it does so is by a kind of keeping you trapped in pain. Um, the um, the bad is good though makes it so that when there is self-reflection on that scenario, you conclude that actually this is correct to have happened to you in some sense.
Mm-hmm. And maybe I'm just positing this there needs to be something that's isomorphic to the bad is good though actually otherwise when you reflect on that scenario you go this sucks I'm just gonna walk out just leave.
Yeah, yeah. Um, but yeah, something isomorphic. It might not be the same idea, but I think um, like bad is good though has the flavor of a lot of Naraka locks. Um, like another way to I mean the damned if you do, damned if you don't quality
Mm-hmm.
is like it's not universal to Naraka, but it's really really common. This business of if you try to get away from suffering, you'll suffer worse, so you'd better choose it.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
I need to pause for a minute. I need to hit the bathroom.
Cool.
There's an amusing side effect here. There's adding something irrelevant but fun. Like I'm just I'm literally feeling my Cheerios. I went and got some earlier because uh, staying with you reminded me that I like Cheerios. So so
Ah,
it was this little burp that I get like, oh, that tastes like Cheerios. And here I am talking to Malcolm and like, oh yeah, these things are in fact very connected.
everything is connected. Oh, so this feels one of the things that we figured out many years ago um at Upstart, LSA, etc., was this sense of deserve is broken.
Yeah. Yep. That feels very connected.
And it's a little confusing because there's a kind of like there's like a local relative social way in which it's not, or something like tangibly, like
I'm not sure I follow.
I think it's something like it seems to me deserve has this property that's a little bit like, well, I mean, this everything that we've been talking about here this whole fucking time. um it's like deservingness maps onto stuff that does happen and continues to happen even though like the concept of deserving is broken. Like, but having that concept is like a sign that you've been corrupted by some sort of psyop, like operating using that concept. um
Yeah. There's like a neighboring attempt to do an antidote that is something like, not that it's a problem for you to be using this psyop, it's just painful, etc. But it feels like that still misses something there.
yeah, what do I mean here? So a thing that might be analogous is like I've been realizing that the concept of white as a race is like inextricably bound up in racism, and that like I have not found a way to use that concept without it making me racist. um
Mm, yeah, I think I follow what you mean. I would want to pick at those words a little bit,
yeah,
but
it's like the concept of whiteness is like made for racism. Like that was like what it was made for, and it sort of has no useful use as a first order concept other than like dividing races in a really stupid way and then judging some of them, either the not white ones or the white ones. um but like the division is so fake that it can't possibly be for anything like um uh, wholesome, because it's not a wholesome division.
I follow what you're saying. I also have to admit that this feels like um, it is in part a description of how much culture has divorced itself from physical reality and blatant observations. The reason we use the word white is because pale skin.
Oh no, I'm with you there. I,
I'm
no
not
no
disagreeing with you. I'm pointing out that there is something very funny going on here where I think you're highlighting something like the social structure of the use of the word. Sort of like technically the N word.
eh,
It means black. It's like
right,
literally a
right,
variation on the
like
Latin
in
word for
Latin, or
black,
yeah.
but that's not the relevant part of the history of the word. Um,
But the thing that I'm trying to highlight here is that like the history of the word white includes a bunch of laws that were passed in the US in the phase when you could only become a citizen, like if you were white. And so they had to decide who is white. And there's all these laws about, well, if you're half, Chinese and half European, you're not white. But if you're only a quarter Chinese and three-quarters European, then you're white. Like they literally had to specify that for all of these slightly more real racial concepts, like in order to define the boundaries of whiteness. Like it's an extremely gerrymandered concept, that fundamentally is not about pale skin, even though that's where it takes its name from. um
Yeah.
and so I guess, like, by analogy to that, like, that was just the first thing that came to mind when I was trying to describe the ways in which deserve is broken. It's like, okay, the world contains, no, this is not a perfect analogy, but it's like people, okay, some people can climb to the top of the tree. You can frame that as those people deserve to get to hang out at the top of the tree, and the people who can't don't. But like that's actually adding an extra thing that's like fake.
That hurts, I think, is more the
Yeah.
important part. Is that it hurts. Right? It hurts and or confuses. In this case, it does both.
Yeah. And it's like you could have a group of people who only want to hang out with other people who can climb to the top of the tree. And so they put their meetups at the top of the tree and do not send a rope down for those who can't, or a ladder down for those who can't climb the tree. And that group has decided that, you know, you know, Bob, who can't climb trees, like, doesn't get to be part of the group. But that group is free to decide that. That's, and the question of whether Bob is worthy is like sort of only true if you accept that that group is the arbiter of what's good, which they just aren't. They're the arbiter of what's in or something.
Yeah. Um, yeah, there's something I find confusing about the whole space of what you're exploring here. Um,
I think
I
I'm a
mean,
little,
this concept is muddy, and mostly when I hear deserve and the whole thing of referencing deserve, there's for me um, a sort of um, it's like, well, that's bad, you know, like uh, there's a simple thing. Like I think this is core to what I've been finding is really helpful with the unwinding.
so I maybe still have some of this confusion here, and maybe you can like help me unwind it like right now live.
Possibly. I was actually there was a part of this that I was tracing a little bit earlier. So on the Cheerios thing, uh, I just it took me a moment to realize why did I want to say that? It wasn't just here's a random experience. Um, it's something like there's a very, very simple thing. This is totally gnosis of the heart.
Hmm.
Totally gnosis of the heart. It's the same thing that lets you see the bad is good though psyop is wrong, and that being told that well like wrongness is a judgment thing and blah blah blah. It's sort of like that's nice. Bad is good though is wrong. Um, like that. That's not just an intellectual thing. The thing that tells you that that means something is not because you have a formal definition of right and wrong, good and bad. It's because you can tell directly what these things mean, that they relate to something having to do with pain and something doing with the inverse of pain, which isn't exactly pleasure, but it's not disconnected from it. When I mentioned the Cheerios thing, um, part of the reason I did so is because I could feel the way in which I felt closer to you for burping Cheerios. And I
Mm.
thought it was funny.
Mm.
And I
Mhm.
thought you might enjoy that experience, like a fragment of that experience. Um, there's a way where it is possible to feel like, and I felt a glimmer of this, sort of like my thoughts had this trace, and I went, yeah, but that's not true. Of well, but that's not exactly on topic, and this is being recorded, and
Mm-hmm.
and like, there's this, but like that has a weight of supposed to. I like there's this thought, this theory that well, we need to make progress on this, and even if we're just jamming and blah blah, and then he's
Right.
patching something, but there's something very simple underneath it, which is ow.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's right. And it's like if the things we wanted to like there are things that don't get mentioned because they don't feel sufficiently like they want to get said, but that can happen in a clean way. And that's different from something that arises and wants to be said, and then there's a kind of like shut up or something.
There's so
Ah,
that's that yes, and that's also that's more blatant than the thing I mean. The thing I mean is more subtle. Um, there's something about like the way that your voice just did this is like like and related to the way that we were going into deserve, and there was like yeah well like yeah I'm like maybe I'm confused in here too, and maybe there's a thing you can help me with here. It's like that might be true. Can you feel the shift I just made there?
ah. Fuck. This is so good and so fucking subtle. There's a kind of apologizing that I think I was doing.
I
I'm
think
doing it
that's a
less
symptom.
now, but I don't know that I'm doing it zero now.
Yeah, it feels to me, and this is just how I'm
You're
receiving.
like, oh,
I feel like
I was
like
apologizing earlier.
yeah, like that's like the loud version, or it's like, oh God, I'm doing the apology thing again. Oh no, it's like yeah, that's blatantly a spin out, and that's part of what it feels like to get snagged by one of the traps of Naraka. Um, but there's something so much more subtle that is something like I know what ow feels like, and I just decide I'm that's not kind to me.
Hmm.
That's not a moral statement, it's a fact. It's like, oh, there's a cup next to me. Only the cup doesn't matter the way my heart does. So there's a preciousness and a caring that comes with this,
Mm-hmm.
in the sense of, oh, this is not arbitrary. So if I'm engaging in something or I'm experiencing something, like this is part of how I detect this when I've been working with some people. Um, um, like okay, so uh,
Hang on a sec. Not sure what I need. I just noticed I wasn't ready for whatever was going to follow your so. Hmm. Yeah, I think I need to move a little slower here.
sure.
Okay, deserve and the the dynamic where somebody punishes themselves so that the like visibly punishes themselves so that they won't be punished by the other.
I think that's definitely a version of it. There's also something close that's like punishing yourself even if it's not visible in order to make it easier to remember that that's not a move that you want to make.
Oh, hmm.
Like the way
I
that
felt I felt when you said that something about like something about the way in which the original spin thing is like you do it to yourself at the encouragement of, I mean, that's true of the like I'm punishing myself so that this other won't punish me, but there's it gets internalized on a deeper level somehow.
yeah, I suspect it came from, oh, I'll be punished if I don't show I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think of things like how the way that mathematicians, and I've done this too. I kind of used to be a mathematician, be working on a problem and then go, is it this thing? No, no, of course that's not how that works. Ah, like, and it's like, why is there pain? Like, there's to me a big difference between the sort of pain that is, I am trying to do this physical obstacle course and this part is hard and I'm putting effort into it to do this chin up even though my muscles are tired.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's like I'm trying to accomplish this thing. And there's a feeling like that in the math. Like, is it this? No, it's not that. How does this? Okay, no, but that doesn't work.
And there's like it's like I've sometimes felt like I'm like straining with a problem and I'm like there's somehow a difference between like her and like the pulling my hair out one where I'm like
Yeah,
something.
yeah. Especially when there are flashes of, no, of course not. God, that was stupid. Like, that's a very out loud
Hmm.
version of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe to some extent, like I'm tracking a different thing with the pulling my hair out thing that's more about like frustration that I meet, like even in this situation of sort of having to solve this problem,
Yeah,
which is a different dimension than the stupid, but they both have a pain and a have to or something.
they have the same taste of Naraka.
Yeah.
Like, whereas you could just go, oh, I both want to solve this problem and don't want to work on it. Both of those are true.
Yeah. Yeah. Hmm. Oh.
I both want to solve this problem right now and don't want to work on it. That's
Right
even
now.
harder. And this poor me is like sort of spun up and overwhelmed by the fact that there are two contradictory desires right now.
Hmm.
That really sucks.
So here's the thing that I notice. When I hear you say that really sucks, I know from context, or I'm assuming, inferring, some part of me has a knowing from context that you don't mean that like contemptuously, facetiously, or something, that it's like deeply sincere. Um, and yet it it like feels to some other part of me like pity
Yeah.
in a way that is bad.
Yeah. So two things to mention here. One is, it actually wasn't deeply sincere in that moment because I wasn't actually experiencing the conflict.
Right. It was so in that sense it was
That
fake.
was, yeah. I was empathizing with a fake thing, and I wasn't fully immersing myself in the counterfactual.
Yeah, that's a
So,
good point.
um, and the second thing is, the particular thing that you're objecting to is something that I have had objections to from my mother. So I may have internalized some of her patterns around that spot.
Wait, in which role?
Um, I would often be in the role you were just expressing.
Ah, yeah.
Where there's this feeling of, like, mom would say, oh, and I bet that feels really bad. and I'd be, and fuck you.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
wouldn't
yeah.
even know why. It was just like technically she's saying all the right words, and also, ah,
Right. Which is maybe related to the thing about like that is not a problem in this case, because the scenario was hypothetical as opposed to like real or
right.
something, but that in general there's a kind of like non-immersion, non-willingness to share the pain,
Yeah,
which is not amplify it or get stuck in it, but to take the perspective of the pain and look at the world from that direction and go, wow, ow,
yeah.
ow, that sure hurts to have
It,
that like
it's not just the unwillingness to do that; it's the unwillingness to do that paired with pretending it is.
mm,
Much kinder would be something like, "Oh, oh, you're in a lot of pain, and I don't have room to be with you about that. I don't like that. I wish I could do something better for you."
mm, right, yeah, yeah. Mm. It's reminding me also of like when I was a kid and I would say to my dad in response to some decision that he'd made, I would say, that's not fair. And he would say, life's not fair. And I would say, fuck you. Um, I don't think that's actually what I said, but like I was like 5 or whatever. Um,
Sure.
but I was like really upset by that response. And I've thought about this a bunch since then. It's like there was a there was like there's like a kind of dishonesty in that, like a failing to own like fa- failing to own his own limitation. Like if he had said, this is the fairest thing I can come up with given everything I'm tracking, I'm sorry it's not enough for you, I wish I could do better, like that would have, but instead he was just sort of like outsourcing the lack of fairness to the universe.
uh,
I was like, I want,
it was even a little bit more than that. It wasn't just outsourcing it; it was kind of implying that it is right for you to encounter this difficulty, and yeah, to me, in your shoes, I would have felt something almost like borderline being blamed for objecting.
yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. You're not supposed to expect better than this. You're not supposed to even want better than this.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
it's one thing to say like we don't know how to do better than this. Uh your expectations, unfortunately, I hate to inform you, but your expectations of being able to like get in a flying car are unrealistic or whatever, kids
Are
want things
unmeetable.
are unmeetable. Like things, kids want things that are not possible sometimes, and might in some cases even say that's not fair about those things when like in fact it's like a physical reality. Who knows? I mean, I think in this case it was much more about like the apportioning of time or goods or something that like, I mean, there's a physical impossible whatever, but like point being, there's like a letting you know that like your expectations are not meetable or whatever, while also, I mean, how to talk so kids will listen talks about the like give them the wish and fantasy. It's like it's like I
I've always wondered what that was for. I could recognize that it worked, and it always struck me as this seems like it's dissociative. But now that I'm in this context, it occurs to me, oh, this is showing the kid that you actually do hear what it is that they want, and that
yeah,
you're,
and you're saying good is good though, actually.
yeah,
Like the kid is like, I want the Nifty Krispies. And you're like, sorry, we've only got Toasty Crunchies. And they're like, ugh. But if they're like, I want the Nifty Krispies, and you're like, I know you want the Nifty Krispies. Nifty Krispies are fucking great. They're so good. You love Nifty Krispies. I know you do. They're your favorite. And the kid's like, yeah. You're like, I wish we had an entire swimming pool of Nifty Krispies, right? You're like, goodness, it's good. And the kid is like, am I right? And you're like, you're right. And then like having established that goodness is good, you're hungry.
Sorry, this
we don't have
choice
Nifty
is
Krispies.
not as good as counterfactuals would have it otherwise.
Yeah, it's like goodness is good. Also, you're hungry. What we've got are toasty crunchies. Do you want some? It's cool to make that link between that how to talk so kids will listen move and the like bad is good actually thing.
Yeah, I definitely never thought of that before.
Right, because the alternative almost says it says without even realizing that it's saying you don't deserve Nifty Krispies. And it completely does not need to say that, but it totally does. Like the
I mean, it could say that. I feel like it more clearly says something like you shouldn't want them.
hmm. This feels like an area of worth like further tinkering, unpacking, exploration, something. Um, like what is the relationship between those two structures? You don't deserve X and you shouldn't want X. They feel quite closely related to me.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm thinking of the way in which like if somebody like tries to ask somebody out that's sufficiently out of their league, they might get a response that's not just a no, but like a you shouldn't have asked.
Hmm.
Um, and I'm not I am it's unclear to me. It's unclear to me what parts of that would go away in like something like fully kind society or something. Like I guess there could be a way of kindly saying like no, and also like I think you're miscalibrated on that being realistic. That doesn't like
Not
imbue
just
it
not
with.
just you're miscalibrated on that being realistic. Like part of the point is something like trying to discourage people from operating that way in general. And
Mhm.
I could imagine a no and you shouldn't have asked, where the shouldn't have asked has less the tone. I think this is part of the point. It has less the tone of feel bad about your nature, and it would have more the nature of um, this is how that move hurts culture and your context. This is the adjustment that you want to make.
Mm, interesting. Yeah. Yeah, and that feels like it maps more clearly if I map it instead onto like if instead of like, person asking somebody out who's out of their league, if instead I map it onto like something like annoying noob who doesn't know anything, like constantly interjecting into a conversation to ask dumb and or slightly irrelevant questions.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sort of like you can be here if you don't keep doing that, but like we're having a conversation that you're disrupting, and we want to keep having that conversation, and like you need to know how to be here in order to have that work or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But like that is a similar situation in which you would often get like a contemptuous blast of like, yeah.
Yeah, and I think in an important way, uh, in practice, somebody shooting above their league in terms of trying to date, you could view as there's a couple of views. One is a kind of noob, and the other is something like, I don't know, like what I guess the other model is something like there's a social order that they are trying to violate because they want the connection more than they want the social order.
Right. And it sort of feels weird to say like, and the social order that like, I don't know. I guess I don't know what to make of the question of whether that social order is like good, but I don't think even if it's not, you can't fix it by like having people make gauche moves or something. So,
Maybe you do. I don't know.
or I don't know.
Yeah, that area feels very tangly to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Like the yeah, I don't know. Um, like the heart of it, like part of what I really liked about you first bringing up the thing about deserve, like to me, the way that deserve plays a role here is that it's connected to what is your value, not just what is your value to society, but almost as though you have a score that is how good a being you are. Um,
Hmm.
and like I think that that is core to the confusion about what's going on with deserve. Um, uh, you're not a good enough being inherently to be able to ask this person out or to get the car that you want or to like be allowed to go for a walk when you still have work to do or you know
Mm-hmm.
there's something weird going on there having to do with intrinsic worth um, and part of the unwinding that I'm recognizing is something like not being willing to compromise desires based on an abstraction of one's worth.
Hmm.
The entertainment of what even is my intrinsic worth is sort of like, well, that question hurts, so I'm done asking it.
Hmm.
Which is a different
Right. And
question
if
from
there's a thing
how I'm
if there's a thing that question is hoping to solve, then I'll find another way to solve that.
because I care about me
Yeah.
and the things that I care about.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Yeah, this loops back to two related points that I tried to make before when I was saying, God, original spin is somehow about this thing, blah blah blah, relating to id first.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
it's like part of the inverse is believing that good can mean something that is external or distributed, like that there is some sort of intrinsic good that isn't about meeting the needs and desires of individuals.
Yeah. Hmm.
Or said a little more extremely to highlight this, that it could be possible for there to be some version of good that involves putting everybody in slightly more suffering.
So this is interesting. When I attend to that, I try to imagine the counterfactual. Like what would it feel like for I mean, here's a great way to put it. What would it feel like for me to be able to tell that there is a thing that is good other than meeting the needs of all the individuals? Like how what sort of thing would that be and how would I be able to tell?
or any or any of the individuals.
Any right. Yeah, right. So like I mean, but put simply, it's like what would it mean for me to be able to tell that there was another source of good?
Right.
And I think what's cool about this is that it ends up being the ought version of the recognition that from an is perspective, all I can know is how things seem to me. Um, and sometimes I refer to that with an isness. Uh, like and we can have a collective sense of how things are. Um, but there's a recognition that all of these objective instruments are still being perceived by a me.
Yeah.
And it's like I could do you want to speak?
If you had a thing to
Yeah,
finish.
I'll sort of finish my arc. And it's like I can see how, like, hypothetically I could imagine meeting an like a meeting a an astral being or something that I want to that seems to me like a being that deserves to be nurtured, whatever that means. Deserves. Interesting. A being that I want to nurture. But then why do I want to nurture it? And it comes back down to this fundamental, like, because it's good for me
Yeah.
or something. Like, it's likewise, like, I want to make the world a nice place because I want to live in a world that's a nice place. And I like, I, there's something slippery here about, like, if I make the world a nice place, but in a way that secretly hides suffering on Mars or something,
Then that would feel bad.
that would feel bad. Exactly. And one of the things that I think morality, as it's currently constructed, plays on is that people are at present in how they construct their agent arena relationship quite um oh, no, even this is part of the psyop. There's something subtle here. So, like, if somebody's suffering in front of me, that feels more bad than if they're suffering on a different continent. But
Yeah.
also, like,
I think this is confusing something with the word feel because the like it's in your tone of voice while you're struggling with this hypothetical, right? There's something here about like they if they're on another continent that doesn't feel as bad, but there's something wrong about that kind of thing. And it's like, yeah, well, you can tell,
right.
right? And then and it's a
There's
different thing than taking in just the imposition of culture about how you should feel.
yeah. There's, like, you know, if I imagine various people suffering far away, then I feel bad about that. But also, I can imagine them suffering far away, whether or not they are. And also, like, my actual sense of agency is, hang on, I'm mixing up. There's a bunch of things I'm sort of smooshing together here. What I want to say, just to be clear, I think you already know this, but um, the thing I'm trying to get at here is that one of the ways that big morality uh like makes its case um that you should not simply, like, do what feels good is by saying, but there's people starving in Africa.
Yeah.
And the response to that is quite simple, I think. In a way, it's the thing we've been pointing at the whole time. It's like, yes, and I care about that exactly as much as I do. And it's like, well, and you should care more. It's like, okay,
But I
uh
don't.
but I don't. Right.
Yeah, I just said the same thing you do, which is, but I
Yeah.
don't.
Right. And it's like, well, if you don't, then I'll beat you. It's like, well, then you're the asshole. You are the asshole.
Right. Yeah.
And being
Um,
willing to say that, like, or at least own it internally. Maybe you don't say that because then you would actually get beaten and you'd be better off just kind of like going somewhere else. But, like,
feels like this is part of how elements of original spin get installed. Remember the core of
yeah,
it being the sense of you encounter a threat from the outside that in fact scares you, and then you're handed a narrative in parallel with the threat that confuses your thinking and your ego structure about the nature of the threat. So like if you get scared that this person is going to beat you, but you get told that the reason you're scared is because you're grappling with these deep moral questions and you're dealing with the ways in which your instincts are wrong and that you actually need to align yourself with something greater, then you may internalize the fear of the person who's threatening you as part of your ways of controlling your own behavior in accordance with your thoughts about morality. That's an example of original spin.
Right, right. That's like kind of the textbook example.
Yeah.
Now I'm imagining us having an original spin textbook.
I guess I've been slowly compiling like examples of this
Yeah.
thing that are just like here's this, here's like
Yeah.
um there's yeah, it seems to me that if like part of the unwinding I'm seeing and feeling here is this quality that I keep zooming in on it for each person. There's something of yeah, but this hurts. Yeah, but you know you care about this. Yeah, but what if I just end up like one person I
Yeah,
was
yeah,
with
yeah.
a couple of days ago, we traced it down to yeah, this hurt here is here. Like she was really wrestling with a sense of like she was experiencing a whole bunch of paradoxical experiences of maybe nothing matters and maybe she hates everyone and maybe she deserves to be hated and all kinds of weird stuff like that that was all getting
Mhm.
mixed in. I don't think she said deserves, but anyway, and just noticing, and all of that hurts, and it's confusing, and you don't like that. And just like there's just something really simple about like, yeah,
Mhm.
that sucks. And as we started to unwind this, a lot of the unwinding amounted to acknowledging what hurts and acknowledging what is sad and acknowledging where there's heartbreak. Just like, oh, this is true. And there was a point where she started to have this sense of, yeah, I talked to her a couple of days later, and she we successfully unwound the Naraka element, like
Mhm.
the core thing of her being actively trapped in a hell realm.
Mhm.
But then she was saying, "I've like a part of me keeps worrying that I'm just gonna not do anything anymore. I'm just gonna lie around and just be okay with that." And it's like, and my sense of her is like, "All right, and if
And
you're
that
okay with
hurts.
that, well, it's yes, but like the part of highlighting." If you are okay with it, then it's great, isn't it? You can stop. And then she started laughing. I went, yeah, so it's funny because that's not true, right? And you know it's not true. So we're done. Right? Right? You don't this reminds me of the business of where
Right, it's like you're free to lie around all day, actually, if in fact you're okay with that. And if you're not free to, not because I say so, but because you will experience a lack of freedom in your attempts to lie around all day.
yes. It reminds me of this thing about in the mockery given to like the atheist mockery given to the Christian worry about if you don't
Yeah, yeah,
believe
yeah.
in God, how can you be a good person?
Yeah.
And no, I say it the way that I do because I think that the atheist mockery of it is in fact not very honest to the real concern. I get the sense that the concern that the Christian side is having for that, the theist side, is basically how do you grapple with nihilism?
Mm.
And the atheist answer is, "Oh, you must not be a very good person." And the more deep Christian answer there is, "What do you mean by good if you don't believe in God?"
Um, yeah.
And I feel like this is starting to,
Right. We are working on an answer to that question
yes,
that can satisfy that. Like
exactly.
that and I've been grappling with this for years. Like I have memories of being like there's I feel like kind of I should be able to just do what I want, but if I do, then like barrage of psychic attacks from all of these internalized original spin.
Yeah. Remember
There's
when I first started describing all this stuff, I was saying, look, there I have a really clear intuition here, and I don't know why it isn't hedonism. I feel like I need to give these caveats that it's not hedonism, but also it's not like it's a big problem if it's hedonism, except for the part where if it's bad that it's hedonism, it's already accounted for. But I don't know how to say this clear, and I feel like I'm saying it a lot more clearly now, which is, what if good is good and bad is bad, and you just admit it? And then hedonism is sometimes good, but not the definition of good, and you know it.
yeah. This is I'm reminded of Mark Littman's um meditation manual, meditation book.page. Um has a bunch of stuff about good and bad and about how you need to take them really seriously, but also like they come from you. Like I think he gets a bunch of this stuff. He gets a ton of stuff. I'm an impressive guy. Um uh and so he refers to meditation as actually in part a process of following your sense of good and bad and evolving your sense of good and bad. And I think like one of the things, and this was one of the things that I think the existentialists knew, and I'm mostly basing this on one talk from Sartre that I read that was very influential on me, um, called Existentialism is a Humanism, where he describes how, like, even if you try to surrender your sense of good and bad to someone else, you are necessarily the one interpreting that. There's no way in interpreting it and choosing who to surrender it to, in a sense. Um,
Oh yeah, yeah,
and so there's no way to actually abdicate that responsibility.
yeah. This is core to what I've discovered is the antidote to the confusion at Enneagram 6.
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of why the six trap is a trap. It's the business of, well, I don't trust myself, so whom am I going to trust? Wait, how do I decide how to make that decision? How do I decide how to make that
Yep.
decision? And oh shit, and oh god. But the fact is that you know you don't trust them.
Hmm.
You know you're confused, right? That you can't get away from actually being grounded in your knowing.
Mm-hmm. Right. It's right there the whole time.
Right. The issue is that it's not reflected in most of how you're working. And so it ends up being very painful.
To you.
Yes. To everybody else too, but
Yeah, yeah. But importantly, you can tell that it's painful. Like it's just right
right.
there. That's also right there.
Yes.
Oh.
There was a thought thread I wanted to weave in earlier. This seems like a good pause for it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Earlier when you were talking about, well, what might an external source of good be? Um, the thing that flashed through my mind was some thoughts I had earlier and I'd forgotten about until just then, um, about the super cooperation cluster.
Mm-hmm.
Um, my suspicion, my current best suspicion, is that even the super cooperation cluster defines good back in terms of the id or whatever that means. Um, but I can't know that. Uh, but I can know something like, I'm just now thinking through this, but um, like it clicked to mind when you were talking about the is ought thing, and it's sort of like the super cooperation cluster is like the ultimate ought, but in terms of
What you can
the
tell for
real
yourself.
good rather than maximal force or something like that. Um, the From the super cooperation cluster, the way for me to derive any good that is in fact coming from that cluster has to go through my current best orientation to good
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
currently is gnostically rooted in the fact that, as far as I can tell, it's all coming from the is, not the ought, which is different from denying that it could possibly be in the ultimate ought. But it's sort of like, well, it might be there and I'm open to the option, but I'm not going to let that constrain what I can tell is actually good.
Oh, yeah, I think you may have misunderstood something I was saying earlier, and I'll get to that in a moment.
Oh, I
But
didn't think that's what you were saying. This is just an additional thought that I noticed in the course of us talking about it.
yeah, yeah, no, no, what you just said makes sense to me. I'm like, yeah, that seems right. The thing I was saying about is an ought earlier was was when I used ought there, I was referring to my own sense of what I want, not to a moral sense. I mean, ought is sort of the wrong word for that, but like I used it just because I was talking, but is an ought. It's like I have my own sense of how things are, and
Like the way that the is-ought problem can show up in the simple act of desire.
yeah,
I am thirsty, therefore there should be water coming into my mouth.
yeah, yeah, exactly. That like on that level. Like, so it's like if so it's like in order to do collective knowing, I need to in order to do collective gnosis, I need to recognize that everything I am knowing about what anybody else knows is is coming into me and is grounded in my own gnosis insofar as it is. Like I can have a sense of being able to tell that somebody else can tell something and we're telling it together, or I might not. And then if I don't, then like, okay, maybe I have my own sense of them being honest, but maybe I don't. Or I have my own sense of them being the sort of person who is in a sort of situation where they would likely to be honest and sincere or not, or whatever. Like I have my own, like, but all of that, any knowing from science, from hearsay, from witness testimony, from, you know, public service announcements from the government, like that's all, in order for me to incorporate it into my knowing, I need to ground it in what is as far as I can tell.
Right.
Okay, then what given everything do I want? Well, that's going to incorporate some stuff about what other people want, but only insofar as I want to. And so it has the same structure as the is thing, but for the collective sense of want. And so from that perspective, it's like slightly immaterial whether the want, some external want, is coming from a being that is material. um it's slightly immaterial because it's like, well, the question is like one of the reasons why I want, one of the reasons why I want other people to get what they want is because uh well, this is interesting, like actually just being with this, I'm like, there's a bunch of stuff in here, about good person and whatnot that is like sort of floating around even as I try to name this.
And,
There's a
part in this spot here, this is one of these spots that I've learned to track very carefully
yeah,
when trying to suss out Naraka threads.
yeah.
Um, the same thing that says, but ow, and I can tell when ow,
Mm-hmm.
it's something different between the I'm a good person, aren't I? Like there's an ow that's
Mm-hmm.
there, or like I need to make sure I'm seen this way, or whatever. Let's
Mm-hmm.
have the threads ow, as opposed to things like a simpler version is I think I am a good person. I think I'm a good person even in terms of society's view of me. I like that glow. Or
Mm-hmm.
the I care about my the impact on the people around me. Or I want to be close with people. right? And that's
Mm-hmm.
reflected in terms of things like, do they see me as a good person? If they don't, that hurts,
Mm.
right? It seems like those are separable
Right.
things.
Right. I really appreciate what you're getting at here. Yeah, it's like I want I want to be respected by people I respect, loved by people I love. Like there's a reciprocal thing there. I want to be able to cooperate economically with strangers who don't have any particular opinion of me, but like I would like them to have money so they can buy my stuff, and I would like me to have money so I can buy their stuff. Um, and therefore I would like our situations to respectively be working. Um, where was I going with this? Oh, I mean, I was trying to sort of make a point about do I want good things for like gods, egregores, angels, uh, like beings that don't have an id per se or something. And
Well, that's odd. Yeah, I noticed there's like, as much thought as I've given to that level of structure, I mostly kind of have a blank with that question. Do I don't know what it even means for, like, I know what it means um, to. I'm thinking of like when I used to live with a toddler with Andromeda. Um, she loved getting to push me over and me like I mean she's like 2 or 3 and like she's shoving on my legs. It's like yep. But if when I collapse and I go there's like get big giggles and she jumps and beats on my chest and it's like I am very powerful. Like oh yeah you're so powerful. Oh no I'm getting beaten
yeah,
up and it's like
yeah.
okay. I just loved this stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I have no trouble with the sense of something like this being is experiencing things that in our interactions, I can give her this like wonderful thing. And
Mm-hmm.
I get fulfillment in that connection. I have no idea what it would mean to give that kind of experience to Disney,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or to wokeism. I have no idea what that would mean. Or science, like the scientific community. I'm like,
Okay. Here's one. Here's one. A person you have loved who is now dead.
that's good.
Thanks.
Okay, I'm gonna chew on that while I go to the bathroom again.
Sounds good.
So I'm gonna want to head out relatively soon, just so you know.
Likewise. Yeah.
Um, I noticed that with the someone I loved who's dead, I notice it matters a lot to me um, whether like the questions of what is the nature of experience after death matter a whole lot more. Like the difference of are they still is there still some version of their consciousness around changes my answers a lot because
Mm-hmm.
if you take like if it's just like the rough sketch of how materialism views what happens is like something like that is roughly correct. Um, at that point, it feels like um, the part that matters is something like what is. Oh, this is interesting. There's like it's like preciousness. This starts to hit the nature in which preciousness and shunyata interact.
Mm.
Like I've been operating under kind of an implicit thing of um, something like my heart knows that bad is bad and good is good, and that there's something precious and important about deciding that I am done with allowing bad for myself. And I feel very solid about that.
Mm-hmm.
The way that I orient to it by default kind of assumes not shunyata, like there's some sort of essence of what matters or something.
Right. Some intrinsic whatever. Yeah.
And that's part of what's going on with like, well, if the person dies and they're not around anymore, like their bits are just scattered. Um, what's left is something like the traces in me and in other people who knew them
Mhm.
of whatever, not just what that person's behavior patterns, but something like all of those were relating to some kind of preciousness that was in them.
Ah, uh-huh.
And then I'm left tracking, well, if I really care about them, if then there's this sense in which even though they're gone, not just as like there's an intuitive thing of something like, well, but I want to honor their memory, but what does that mean?
Hmm.
And I trace it as something like, well, I don't know, if I expand the sense of self so that it's like, if I am part of humanity and humanity is honoring that person even though they're gone, like to the best of the ability, it's something like what they held precious shall still be held precious
Hmm.
to the best of our ability. And then I end up tracing something like what exactly has changed now that they're dead. And it gives this kind of weird impression of uh, the rounded thought is something like, what if I am dead? Or that's another way of pointing at the shunyata thing of like, there's nobody here, but the
Oh,
preciousness is. So what is this doing that is caring for the preciousness here? It's like a node tracking something.
right. It's like, you no longer need to make sure, like, there's no longer a need to make sure that they get fed or whatever. Like, that is not a need that they have anymore. You might put out a seat at the table for them for like spiritual reasons. Um, that's like about including their presence, their preciousness in a social context.
Right. Yeah, but more central. Like a funny example would be if you died,
Mm,
and then everybody went, "Well, Malcolm's gone. I guess we don't need to care about interfaces anymore."
mm,
I, I it feels sort of like, wait, what? That wasn't just because he got his jollies off on this.
right.
It was because he was actually caring about something, and that something is precious, and that's part of why it mattered to him.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there is well, I don't know. I'm not even entirely sure what the difference is between like more materialistic and more spiritualistic versions of this stuff at this point. Like my current cosmology, I mean, I know how they feel from the inside, but like they currently feel quite unified in me. So I'm sort of, I'd have to like go to some work to like go stand over in like a some other perspective. But it's like it's like the way in which someone lives on in me is a kind of life after death, and it's also not, and it's empty, and it's also has some form, and it's like that's what's up. I don't know, and it sort of feels like I don't
It
know.
sounds less like the frames are unified and more like you've found a frame that resolves the apparent
Yeah,
contradiction.
yeah.
Because I noticed that there are a couple of different frames along the lines of like a blatant one is stuff like Christian Afterlife, where basically the person is the same but they don't have a body and now they're in a different world. Um, and there are variations on this theme that you sometimes get the impression of if you listen to people's near-death experience accounts. There's some
Mm.
they keep saying, look, there's something that's really hard to describe about this because there's a whole timeless nature, etc. But with that exception, I left my body and then was walking around. I was actually didn't recognize it at first, and then there was this being, and they took me somewhere, and blah blah blah.
Mm.
Um, and that to me seems like it's structurally very different. Like there was some layer of how consciousness interacts with the physical world, such that there's a consciousness thing suffusing the physical world, and then we go there or something like that. To me, would be meaningfully different.
Yeah, no, it's true. I don't have that. But like even so, there's a like the when you talk about like I made this analogy from playing with the toddler to like how would you how would you delight uh you know a friend of yours who died, and it's like uh well, like in order for that to work, like you need a feedback loop.
Right.
And so if they go to some other realm where they can't communicate with you, no feedback loop. Like, doesn't work. Like the resonance, the attunement is part of it. And like you can have that with a live person, toddler or otherwise. You can have that with your own imaginal sense of the person. You can have that with a collective imaginal sense of the person, whether that imagined person is, all of your, friend or relative who just died, or whether that collective imaginal person is literally Jesus.
Yeah. I was about to say that at this point it breaks down the analogy to the egregores, because you can get feedback loops with the egregores. But I think what you're saying is something like the only kind of feedback loop we have with the dead is their egregoric form.
And I don't know that egregore is quite the word for it, but yes, they're the way that they live on in our sense, the way that their soul, whereby soul I mean like relevance realization function or something, um, lives on in myself and in others and in our talking about that person and so forth. Like they no longer have an organismic generator of that relevance realization function.
Mm-hmm.
Um, their soul has sort of become untethered, or something.
Yeah.
Insofar as it ever had a center, which again, is like sort of questionable, but obviously there's clearly a sense in which a living person has more of a center than a dead person does. Like,
I mean, that's actually under question, but we can tell. Right? We can tell that they have a center when they're living, and there's like, because there's
oh,
something like this is
I see what you mean.
this is core to the whole issue of what the hell is what is the subjective experience of dying, and there's something very, yeah, there's something very strange
Well,
about
but to
combined with the non-dual claim that the impression that there is a center from which you are experiencing things is a confusion, which keeps having me stare at that going. It's a little bit like saying, ah, well, you only think you are experiencing what you are experiencing. It's like, well, yes, I do. That is in fact how experience
yeah,
works.
yeah. I mean, I've tasted some amount of the like centerlessness thing a little bit. Um, actually, after the coherence retreat in April, for some reason, I had a couple of days where things were just like very like,
Mhm.
yeah. But um but there's like, I don't know, from like a Christopher Alexander perspective, like a living person is a center. Um and that's maybe just literally a different meaning of the word center than the Buddhists are talking about or something.
Yeah,
Um
because I mean something like, it sure seems to me that there is something I want to tag as subjectivity, uh, that somehow allows there to be a distinction between me and you. Um, and it sure seems like that subjectivity stops being in a previously living body when it dies.
yep. Well put.
As I sure hope that's the case. But yeah.
Yeah.
That, by the way, what I just did there, I actually just I've mostly cleaned this out of my system, but like that was an interesting counterexample. That was bringing in an element of Naraka.
Huh. The I sure hope that's the case, and like the way that you laughed around it.
Yeah, the point of the humor, the reason it would create laughter is because it touches on something that would be existentially horrid.
Hmm.
Like that's the whole joke.
Right, right. Is like,
Playing with that possibility and then sort of laughing in order to turn numb to it so it can do its work subconsciously.
huh. So what's the non what's the move out of Naraka from here?
I don't know what happens with death.
Huh.
And I mean that's one way of saying it, but like it's not like there is a move. It's more like, oh, that hurts.
Oh, and letting it hurt rather than kind of like laughing and then kind of not like the
You know, my intuition is slightly different there, but yeah, like it would it has the taste of Naraka still is there if I have some sense of, oh, but I need to look at the fact that it hurts and acknowledge
yeah, yeah,
this
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's
possible.
clearly fucked. That's clearly fucked.
The element of like the way that I caught it here was, oh, that doesn't feel good. And then noticing that doesn't feel good and going, ah, right, and I'm a no to that.
hmm,
And
hmm,
like it's an affirming something of, oh yeah, I don't like that.
hmm.
And I back my I don't like it.
Yeah. I have the sense that you're integrating this like way deeper and faster than I am. Like I'm like getting a sense of it. I'm like, yeah, yeah,
I mean, as far as I can tell, you did not have your face shoved in the flickering hell for years. So that's you may be slightly less motivated than I've
well, yeah.
been.
But no, but there's a way in which like I'm watching you. I mean, I've been practicing kind of backing myself, listening to myself, et cetera, et cetera. Um, I mean, for years, but like increasingly the last few weeks, I've kind of made some aspect of that a priority. And I'm still just like finding it really difficult. And I think like there's something funny about that. And I would like to explore that with you at some point. Um,
Well, I'd be happy to help if I can.
yeah.
I don't I actually don't know why this is cascading so fast and deep for me.
Hmm. Well, and we speculated that one wave of it like swept through my system in the wake of the NNTD insight, which I think
Yeah,
is right.
yeah, no, I think that's correct.
Um,
I also think that Perry Chase helped a lot with this.
huh.
Um,
Right.
I still don't really understand. Like, I don't have models in of the type that you and I usually jam on that
Yeah.
really explain why.
Yeah.
I understand in her models why it happened, and her models are kind of weird, and the ontology is inconsistent. But
Mm-hmm.
um, in particular, it postulates something like our souls come to Earth to have lessons, and I that seems like there's it feels like that is an intuition pump that's taken as an ontological claim,
Right. Right.
and I don't think it actually works if you stare at the ontology.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so, but all that aside, I noticed that the two really big pieces that feel like this that kicked it off for me were a um, a shamanic ceremony she led, where she directly targeted some difficulty I was having that was obviously related to Naraka.
Mm-hmm.
Explicitly, actually, I brought in the point of
Hmm.
the
Yeah.
Hell Realm stuff, and then this insight about original spin,
Right.
and those two have been synergizing a lot.
Right. Right. Hmm. Cool. Well, there's more to explore there. What else do we want to say before we wrap, if anything?
Mm, I don't know. Mm, I really like this direction.
Hmm.
It's very, it feels beautiful and free. Even with having, there was a week in there, about 5 days, it was um, full uprooting from my sense of my gnosis and wrapped in pain and terror. Um,
Since the
even,
original spin
yeah,
thing?
yeah,
Yeah.
I
Hmm.
told you about it. This is the thing where I thought that, like where Perry handed me this opportunity, and I wasn't expecting to need to deal with it for several months, which I was grateful for because I was letting the original spin
Right.
things settle in. And I was going, my God, I actually don't know whether I would want to continue on to that other program with Perry,
Hmm.
but good thing I don't have to make that decision for like 5 months.
Hmm.
And she said, you need to make that decision right now or it'll close to you. And I'm like, fuck. And then like existential FOMO and lots of stuff like that were
Hmm.
putting up. And it and highlights ways in which I still have a lot of Naraka stuff that's pretty deep down.
Mm.
But uh, a lot of the reason I said no was because I recognized that um, the whole point of why all of that was painful was because of a sense of not yet trusting that I can handle it. And I'm
Mm.
not making this sound much more logical. Like I thought about it a lot, but it was much more of an energetic thing of
Yeah,
simply
yeah.
I don't a big part of me doesn't yet trust my ability to face certain things if I am not sufficiently supported, and I also don't trust people to support me in those spaces, and so it feels like terrible, terrifying, horrible. And looking at that, going, I think I've got me.
Mm.
I don't particularly want to turn away from support, but I will do with less support to show myself that I can.
Mm. Mm. And there was a sense, yeah, and unlike, so this brings everything back around to the thing we were talking about at the beginning, which is a great way to end, which is the thing about like people feeling like, oh, I can't ask for support. And there was a recognition that you were you were asking for support, but in a way that was like layered on top of I can't ask people for support almost. And so it's like taking that off to be like, oh, I can't ask people for support. Fuck that. I can ask people, or there's some like,
Yeah. To be more precise, it was asking people for support in a way that was reinforcing my distrust of myself.
yeah, yeah, right.
And so, in order to recover that trust, I needed to be willing to go without support in
Mm-hmm.
this particular way. Um, and taking that slowly enough that the part that is terrified of both being without support and not being able to hold myself,
Mm-hmm.
just going, okay, we'll take this one step at a time. Um,
Hmm.
so amusingly enough, that also like part of the reason for all that is that there's all this investment that had been going into Perry's stuff that I could feel, oh, if I invest this in building the things that I want to build,
Mm-hmm.
then I get more things that I want. And uh,
That's good.
reasons, yes, this is good. And the reason I wasn't was in part because of a fear that there was some external rule that I was violating and I would be punished for it. And that is Naraka.
Hmm. All right. Take care, my friend.